The 2019 Yamaha YXZ with the reduced gearing. Is it geared low enough to run a 32-inch tire? I'm going to do my best to answer that question, and I'm going to talk about the reduction in the newer model YXZs, match it up to the increased tire size, compare it to the older model YXZs, and try to make it as clear as possible. Stay tuned. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my den. For all you new guys to the channel that haven't subscribed yet, if you don't mind, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave us a comment, share the video. Anything you guys can do to possibly help the channel grow, we really appreciate it. Myself and all the guys that I ride with, every time we go out and ride, we bust our butt to come up with the best footage that we possibly can. So anything you guys can do to help the channel grow, we really appreciate it. So with that, I've been getting a lot of questions lately and there's some questions that I've been getting since the channel started that I've gotten on a regular basis ever since the beginning, but a few of them I've been getting a lot more of and a lot more frequent in the last month. So I just thought I would put together a quick video just to answer some of the questions I'm getting. I think they're kind of interesting topics. So let's see what we got here. Some of the questions I've been getting. Well, the one question that I get on a regular basis is how my clutch holds up to the type of trails that we ride. So just to let everybody know, quick update on my clutch. I just turned over 2,700 miles on my machine this past weekend. And at this point, I'm still running my stock clutch. Made no modifications to it. Everything's original, just like it was the day I picked it up from the dealer. So as of right now, my clutch is still going strong. And I say that now, and this weekend it'll probably start slipping. Another question that I've been getting quite a bit of, as some of you guys may know, I am now running a heavy duty front diff, and I've been asked several times after the last few videos that we've put up after I got my machine back, how often is my front diff locked in whenever we're doing videos? So I'm going to go into that just a little bit, talk a little bit about my diff. After I get finished with that, my next question that I kind of wanted to cover in this video, and I've been getting this quite a bit here recently, and actually had a discussion about it in our Facebook group just a few days ago. So quite a few people are asking me my opinion on the 19 or newer YXZs with the lower gears that they have, if they're geared low enough to run a 32-inch tire. And every time I'm asked that question, the first thing that pops into my mind is the guy that's asking the question, he's probably wanting to get, I'm thinking he's wanting to get more aggressive with his YXZ. Maybe drive over bigger rock, get in deeper ruts, or just something similar to that. But that necessarily doesn't have to be the case. So I've been thinking about it here recently, and I put my thinking cap on, and I've been trying to come up with a way to kind of explain it to where it makes a little more, it's just a little more clear, makes a little more sense, and just kind of easier to understand what happens when you put 32s on a the 19 YXZ and the differences between a 19 or newer YXZ running the stock 29-inch tires compared to the older model YXZs running the 27-inch tires and the higher gearing. So I'm going to go over that some. Hopefully I can make a little bit more sense out of that to some of you people. A lot of you guys probably already know everything I'm going to be saying. And then last but not least, I've been getting messages through Instant Messenger. About 5 or 6 different people in the last 2 or 3 weeks have been messaging me, asking me what I think about running the high-low gearbox in my YXZ. Now, the high-low gearbox is something new to the YXZ. A gentleman somewhere near the West Coast came up with it. I'm not sure how much or how long ago, but that thought kind of has run through my mind, and I'm just going to kind of let you guys know where I'm at with the high-low gearbox and what I think about it, and if it's good for me or if it would be good for me. So with all that, I guess we can go back to my front differential. For those of you that don't know, I've had my YXZ now. I don't know if I've already mentioned it, but I bought it in November of 2018. Yeah, I just turned over 2,700 miles on it, but that's kind of irrelevant. But in the time that I've owned my YXZ, I've been through 4 front diffs. I've taken out 4 front diffs, and the last 3 have been probably in the last 7 or 8 months, just off the top of my head. I mean, the last 3 have went pretty quick. And after the last one went out, the 4th, I was kind of at my wit's end. You know, I've got to come up with something to remedy this front diff issue, or I've got to think about getting another machine. So the first step that I took, I went to Facebook, I went to Yamaha YXZ Addicts, I went to the search bar, and I just typed in front differential. Several posts came up, and luckily a post came up about the rebuilt front diff, and I started reading the comments, and lo and behold, I found Jesse Hancock's. So whenever I was reading that Jesse Hancock's rebuilds front diffs and makes them stronger, and he also rebuilds them to where you keep your front locker, well, I was pretty quick after reading that post to send Jesse a message, and we conversed back and forth and got our arrangement straightened out, and that's definitely the route I ended up taking. Just for FYI, I guess, he can rebuild a front differential for any side-by-side on the market. It doesn't have to be a YXZ. He can do it for Polaris, he can do it for Can-Am, Honda, Kawasaki, Arctic Cat, John Deere. If it has a front differential, he can rebuild it. And all of his parts are billet, and he adds 2 extra spider gears. So it's much stronger than a stock front differential. And also too, there's 2 ways, if anybody did decide to go with Jesse, there's 2 ways you can go about doing it. You can either mail him your complete front diff, the housing and everything, just mail that to him, and he can take apart your housing, take apart the older, weaker parts, put his billet parts back in, put everything back together, and just mail you a diff ready to install. That's the route I chose. Or if you would rather, you can you can order the parts from Jesse. He can mail you all the parts that you need. You can take apart your housing, remove everything, and put his parts in yourself. That's entirely up to you. I chose to let Jesse do it just due to all the issues and troubles that I've had out of my front differentials. I didn't want to leave anything for chance. I wanted to make sure it was done absolutely correct the first go round, and Jesse's the front differential guru, so I let him do his thing, and so far everything's working out pretty well. So back to the question, how often is my front diff locked when we're making videos? Well, since I've gotten my machine back, I can tell you the videos that we've done is 96 and 97 at Windrock and 71 and 71B. And we did those 2 videos on the same day. Every outside clip that we took, my front diff was locked on every shot on both videos. The terrain was bad enough to where I needed to lock in my front diff, so every shot on those videos I was fully locked. The following week, me and Aaron went back to Windrock and we did trails 22 and trail 38. And it was really wet that day. Trail 22 isn't just a treacherous trail, but it was quite slick that day because it had been raining quite a bit. So I'm pretty sure every outside shot we took on 22, I was in full diff lock. Trail 38, I was in full diff lock on every single shot we took, with the exception of the very first one. And that first section that we got out and recorded, I've done Trail 38 several times, and that section is normally a little tougher than what it was the day me and Aaron did it. It's been about a year since the last time I was on 38, but that section was a little hairy. So we had already talked about it. Yeah, when we get up to the tree stump and the log across the trail and all the rocks there in front of it, let's go ahead and get that recorded. Well, we get there and we both get out, and we're kind of asking each other, well, why are we recording this? But hey, we're already out of our machine. Let's go ahead and get it. I think I made a comment during that clip that this was the calm before the storm. Yeah, that's the only clip on Trail 38 I was not in full diff lock. But every other outside shot after that on 38, I was fully locked. Normally, whenever we're videoing, we get out to record the challenging sections that are somewhat entertaining to record. At least we do the best of it that we can. And 90% of the time, if we're taking outside shots, my front diff is locked. I'm sure there's been a time or two in past videos we might have recorded a section of a trail just to show that part of the trail. Maybe it wasn't that treacherous that I wasn't fully locked in front diff. But normally if we're outside recording, I would say again, about 90% of the time, my front diff is engaged. I'll try to remember in future videos when I'm fully locked in front diff to maybe mention it. I'm probably going to forget, but you guys can probably tell by how hard the obstacles are if my front diff's engaged or not. But I will try to do a better job of keeping you guys updated on what's going on with the heavy duty front diff. I will say, excuse me, this past Sunday, well actually the week before this past Sunday, Aaron in the beast of a KRX, he ordered a new spring set from Shock Therapy. Well, he got his springs in last week. So after he got his springs installed on his KRX, he suggested, how about this coming weekend, this Sunday, we go for a leisure ride, don't really worry about recording, let me get a feel for my springs, let me kind of break them in a little bit, and things like that. So this past Sunday, me and Aaron and Aaron's mother, Angelia, we went for a TWRA ride. We rode up to the Eternal Flame, and places up in there. We ended up going to the bottom of the Dragon's Back and in that area from Caravel. And I will say, I was under the impression from Aaron that we were going to be on easy, fast-paced trails, because I've never been to the Eternal Flame before. This past Sunday was my first time. And I was under the impression from Aaron, yeah, the trails are kind of easy and they're going to be fast-paced. So, normally my sway bars, front and rear, I don't even have my front sway bar. Not only is it disconnected, I removed the front sway bar altogether because I knew a while back I'll never rehook my fronts. But I've disconnected all my sway bars. My rears, I removed the links, but I just zip tied my sway bar up out of the way. So to get a little more prepared for the fast-paced trails that Aaron was telling me we're going to be on this past Sunday, I went ahead and threw back on my sway bar links just to give me a little bit more stability hitting some curves. So, and this was areas of Windrock and TWRA and that I've never been on before. So, needless to say, the trails were a little more difficult than I was expecting. And there was a little bit of fast-paced trails, not a lot. It wasn't anything treacherously dangerous. Well, maybe, but it was challenging trails, and the reason I'm telling you this past Sunday, we wasn't recording and we didn't even take any pictures. It was just kind of a relaxing day for us. But I used my front diff a lot more than I had expected. We came across some nasty ruts, some pretty gnarly hill climbs with rocks all going up the hill, ledges, all kinds of different things. I was locking in my diff quite a bit this past weekend. And anybody local that's looking for a rowdy good time and you haven't been on the Dragon's Back lately, I highly recommend go to the bottom of the Dragon's Back and drive up it, because it's gotten rough. It was definitely a good time going up the Dragon's Back. But one habit with my front differential that I have created for myself, I guess I can say, over the past 4 or 5 months. When we're out riding, I'm using my diff quite a bit. One thing, whenever we make a stop, it's kind of became a habit for me to go check out my front diff, see if I see any holes in it, see if I've blown any holes or anything like that. But another habit that I've accumulated is while I'm actually driving, every time my front diff is blown, the first sign that tells me, yep, my front diff is gone, if I'm driving it while I'm in limited slip 3-wheel drive, limited slip, not with my diff locked in, driving down the trail, if I go to make a hard right turn, it gets really difficult to steer. I mean, just like my front diff is engaged. It gets really difficult to steer, but as long as I keep steering it in that direction and I kind of force it and keep going with it, it finally pops free. And when it pops free, I can actually hear the popping sound coming from my front diff. It feels like my front diff is somehow trying to engage. And if I keep steering it in the direction I'm going in, I finally break it free, and then it steers fine for just moments. And by the time I get to the next curve, maybe a left-hand curve, I go to turn left, I go to turn my steering wheel, and it feels just like my front diff is engaged. But again, if I keep forcing it to turn, it finally does pop free. I hear the pop sound coming from up front, and my steering frees up for seconds, and then it does it all over again. So I don't know if my front diff is trying to engage after whatever's broke is causing it to do that, or what the issue is with that. But that's the first sign I know, yep, my front diff is gone. So in short, ever since I've had this heavy duty diff put in, the 2 days we rode at Windrock and then this past Sunday, the majority of the time that I'm driving in limited slip 4-wheel drive, I am so paying attention to my steering to see how it's acting. It's unbelievable. I mean, I'm paying more attention to how my steering feels a lot of times than where I'm going. And I've even got a little bit of paranoia with it. There's times I get a little paranoid and I think, wait a minute, is it happening? Is my steering locking up? No, that's just my paranoia. Everything's good. But yeah, whenever it does go, that's the experience I've had. I could tell it immediately with my steering. It's almost impossible to steer. But I hope that answers your all's questions on the, seemed like I was going to say something else, but I forgot what it was. But in short, the front diff's doing well. I'll try to do a better job keeping you guys posted and up to date on it. Then the next question that I've been getting quite a bit of, and I'm kind of excited to talk about this. I personally think it's a little bit interesting. But ever since 2019, when the newer YXZs came out with the lower gearing, it seems like, I wouldn't call it a controversial, but maybe a disputed topic, especially on social media. Because when it first came out with the reduced gearing, a lot of people were claiming that it was a rock crawler. Some people were claiming it wasn't a rock crawler. Some people didn't know really what to think about it. So I have a 2019, but I'm running the 70/30 gear reduction and the heavy flywheel. The stock gearing with the 32-inch tires wasn't low enough for myself. So now to try to explain that a little bit better, to put it kind of into perspective, here's what I came up with. So in order to do this, I'm going to go back to the previous older models, the 16 through 18s. So I'm going to call them the older models. And then the 19s up to 21, they're the newer models with the newer, lower, reduced gearing. So older models, high geared, small tires. Newer models, lower gearing, bigger tires. So 16 through 18s, when they came out, they were geared high with 27-inch tires. And I'm probably guessing Yamaha's intent wasn't really East Coast for these machines. I mean, I'm not sure if maybe they were thinking it was sufficient for East Coast trails. And apparently I guess they kind of are, because a lot of you guys drive them on the East Coast trails. And from what I see on social media, a lot of you guys don't have much trouble with them. But primarily, I think the older models were more made for the sand dunes and maybe the racetracks. But in 2019, Yamaha made several upgrades to the YXZ. They lowered the gearing, they upsized the tires. They made a lot of other upgrades. I'm not really going to get into all those. I'm sure you guys are well aware of what's going on with that. But the upgrades I'm going to talk about is the lower gearing and the increased tire size. Now on the gearing, they changed the gearing in first gear to a 24% reduction. And then the second through fifth gear in your overall gearing, they gave that a 7% reduction. Okay, 24% first, 7%, 2 through 5. But they upsized the tires from a 27-inch to a 29-inch. Now, I'm sure you guys are aware, you increase your tire size, you make it bigger, that's going to take away from your low-end gearing. So the best way I could come up with this is, hypothetically speaking, I'm just giving this example just so you can catch on to where I'm going with it a little faster. You got the older model YXZ with a 27-inch tire. So hypothetically, double the size of that 27-inch tire. Okay, now you've got a 54-inch tire. Now, I know that's a big tire, but my point is, when you go from a 27-inch tire to a 54-inch tire, you just increase that tire size 100%. That is a 100% tire increase. We can all agree on that. So when you take the 27-inch tire from the older models and you increase the size to a 29-inch tire, you just made a 7% size increase. So going from a 27 to a 29 is a 7% increase in tire size. So what you do then, the newer models have got the 24% first gear reduction. So you take that 7% increase in tire size, you've got to take that away from that 24% first gear reduction. So when you do that, that leaves you with a 17% first gear reduction. Now on the newer model YXZs, their tranny has got a legitimate 24% gear reduction. But whenever you increase the tire size to a 29-inch with a 7% increase in size, you take away that 7% reduction, or 7% of that reduction. And so now your machine is functioning at a 17% gear reduction. It's actually equipped with a 24% reduction, but with the bigger tires, it's functioning at 17%. Now that's not including the added weight, because whenever you add weight to you go a bigger tire, you add more weight to that tire. So whenever you've got added weight, that's going to take away from your low end gearing as well. So I didn't go into specifics with weights of tires. I didn't want to go into that grave of detail. I think you guys get the gist of what I'm saying. And so driving a 19 YXZ on stock 29-inch tires would be pretty equivalent to driving an older model YXZ on 27-inch tires with a 17% gear reduction and a little bit better ground clearance. So that would be the difference on that. So, but then again, the extra weight of tire, you got to keep in mind, the gear reduction functioning, the reduction it's functioning at would probably even be a little bit lower than 17%. Again, I don't know the exact weights, but it's going to be a little bit lower than 17%. So your 2 through 5 gearing in the 19 models and newer, they've got the 7% reduction in the overall gearing 2nd through 5th. So 7% reduction, 7% increase in size. That 7% tire increase just leveled out the 7% all-around reduction. So basically what that means, once you hit 2nd gear in the newer model YXZs, 2nd through 5, you're going to be pretty equivalent to the older model YXZs as far as top end speed, acceleration, and all that other stuff. The gears are going to be functioning pretty close to the same. So I mean, I hope all that makes sense to you guys. That's the best way I know to explain it. And so for people asking me if I think the 19 and newer model YXZs with the lower gearing, if they're geared low enough to run a 32-inch tire. So again, I'm going to go back to the older model YXZs with the higher gearing and the 27-inch tires, because I want to compare this to the older models. Because a lot of you, that's why I mentioned earlier, a lot of you guys, many of you guys are driving the older model YXZs on East Coast trails without any issues. So you go to the older model YXZ with a 27-inch tire. You increase that tire size to a 32. Now that's a little bit bigger of a jump in tire size. And weight will play a little bit more of a factor in this too, because I'm pretty sure there's a significant weight difference between a 27-inch tire and a 32-inch tire. But when you go from a 27-inch tire to a 32-inch tire, that is a 18% increase in tire size. You just increased that tire 18%. So when you take the newer model gearing with the 24% first gear reduction, you got to take away the 18% increase in size away from that 24% first gear reduction. So what that would leave you with is a 6% functioning reduction. I mean, your vehicle is then operating like it's at a 6% reduction. That's how it's functioning. But then the difference in the weight between a 27-inch tire and a 32-inch tire is going to be a little more significant. So that's probably going to drop that reduction even lower. So I'm kind of guessing, just off the top of my head, running a 32-inch tire on a newer model YXZ with stock gearing, it's going to be pretty close to the gearing that you're running in the older model YXZ with 27-inch tires in first gear. I think they're going to be fairly similar. The big difference would be 2 through 5. You've got the 7% reduction in second through fifth gear in the newer YXZs. 7% overall reduction. 18% tire increase. And what that does, you take 7% reduction minus 18% tire increase. That leaves you with negative 11. It's whenever you're talking about subtracting from a reduction, that's not really a negative number, because what that negative 11 is it's actually going to the high side of your gearing. So what you just did, putting 32-inch tires on the newer model YXZ, you've just increased your top end gearing by about 11%, which is going to help you out a lot if you're looking to gain top end speed. So running 32-inch tires on the newer model YXZs, it's going to take you a little bit longer to get there. But once you get there, your top end speed should be quite a bit better than the older model YXZs. It should be quite a bit better than the newer model YXZs running 29-inch tires. So that's the best way I can explain that. I can tell you from personal experience, when I first bought my YXZ, I went with 32-inch tires straight from the dealer, straight from the get-go. I never even drove it with the 29-inch tires, so I have no idea what it's like to drive one with 29-inch tires. But what I can tell you is, and my model's a sport shift, and you've got the green clutch light on all the sport shift models that tells you when you're half clutching. Half clutching, slipping the clutch, riding the clutch, whatever you want to call it. Whenever you're pulling out of first gear, whenever that green light goes out, your clutch is fully disengaged and you're rolling with it. So one thing that I did notice in my YXZ running 32-inch tires on stock gearing, my green clutch light wouldn't go out till I got up to about 6 to 7 miles per hour. So that's kind of a high pace to get off your clutch. So for that reason alone, that's when I knew pretty quick off the bat, yeah, I got to do something with this. That's not going to work. I will say, if you guys have seen our Trail 16 and Trail 12 videos, we've got, I think, a couple of each one up on the channel. They're about a year apart. The first time I took my YXZ to Windrock on the 32-inch tire, stock gearing, that's the first two trails I hit. Trail 16 and Trail 12. And I went up both of them. And in all retrospect, it handled both trails flawlessly. I mean, it was almost effortlessly. It went up them with no issue whatsoever. But I will say that I went up them a lot faster than everybody else I was with. I mean, I had to let them get a good distance ahead of me, and I had to hit things with momentum. There wasn't really any slow speed at all. In order to avoid from riding my clutch, I had to go fairly quick through some pretty big rock, up some pretty big ledges, but it was able to do it. Not a lot of issues with it. And trail 16 and 12, they're not exactly easy trails. So, but for you guys that are wanting to run 32-inch tires, yeah, it definitely can do it. I would just highly recommend stick to moderate or slightly difficult trails. I think if you decide to get into the really difficult trails, the really big rock and things like that, you're going to have a lot of clutch issues. You're either going to have clutch issues or you're going to have everything else breaking. Because if you've watched any of our videos, if you think I hit stuff hard, you're going to be doubling that on 32-inch tires on stock gearing, because you're going to have to hit things probably twice as hard as I hit. And I would also recommend, if you're looking to get 32-inch tires for a YXZ, just you got to remember, and some people may not know this. I mean, I know all of you probably do, but some people may not be aware of this. Tires, I don't think there is a legitimate 32-inch tire. If there is, I'm not aware of it. They're either a little taller than 32 or they're slightly shorter than 32. I'm running Sedona Rockabillys. They measure 30.5 inches in height, and that's the way I want it, because I'm pretty confident if you went up to a tire that measured 33 inches, you're probably going to run into some trouble running a YXZ. I mean, for one, it's just probably going to, that would be too big for the gearing, I would probably say, on that one, and that's just a ton of weight. But I run the Sedona Rockabillys. They're 30.5 inches tall. They're a light tire. They're 8-ply. They go really well on the rock. They go pretty good in the mud. The only negative thing I can come up with on the Rockabillys is they're more of a rounded tire, and so the side bite isn't the greatest. So like if I'm trying to straddle a rut, a muddy rut or something like that, the side bite on my tires don't have the best grip, and a lot of times I end up falling in it. I think it was a Tackett Creek video, Wolfpen maybe, I'm pretty sure it was Wolfpen. At the end of the video, we're all driving over a rut, and I was the last one to go. And the guys in front of me were running Rockzillas, and Bailey was in his girlfriend's XP, and I don't remember what tires she had on hers. But they had a better side grip on their tires. I think they were more of a flat top tire. They drove across that rut like they were on a Sunday drive. I tried it 2 or 3 times. I kept falling in it. Finally, the last time I fell in it, I got a little frustrated, and I don't want to plow through it, so I tried to plow through it, and I ended up turning over. So that's due to the side bite on the Rockabillys. In my opinion, that's the only weak spot they have. As far as tires go, I mean, I've honestly got to say that the Rockzilla right now is without a doubt the best tire on the market. Although they're the best tire on the market, it's my opinion, I don't think they're the best tire to suit the YXZ. Mainly because a 32-inch Rockzilla weighs about 6 pounds more than the Rockabilly. And I'm sure the Rockzillas are going to have better traction than the Rockabilly has. So whenever you add a lot of extra weight, much better traction, and momentum, having to hit things a little bit harder, I mean, that's just, you're destined to break something. So although, I mean, I think Rockzillas are an outstanding, excellent tire if you're in a low-geared machine that's going to be crawling things and not having to hit things quite as hard. And that's just my opinion. You guys take it for what it is. But I mean, I personally think if you're going to a 32-inch tire, that it's kind of hard to beat the Rockabilly for a YXZ. And then the last thing I would recommend to you guys, I think I've mentioned this in one previous video. If you're looking to go to a 32-inch tire, I'm assuming you're wanting to gain ground clearance. So what I did with my machine is I jacked up the rear end, I loosened the top nut on my rear shocks, and I cranked down the bottom nut on my springs, just to give me a little bit better ground clearance in the rear. I know the manuals and all that stuff say that the rear end needs to be a little bit lower than the front, but And I'm sure there's a reason for that, but the type of trails I'm on, I don't think that geometry of your machine really makes much of a difference. I mean, we very seldom get over 20 miles per hour, but by cranking down the preload and your rear springs, that will raise the rear end of your machine up. Because whenever I first put the 32s on the YXZ, before I did any adjustment to my rear springs, I only had about 13 inches in the rear. I had about 14 and a half in the front, but my rear was sitting at about 13 inches. So I cranked down the preload on my rear springs, and definitely if you ever do that, be sure you jack your machine up off the ground. It just makes it a whole heck of a lot easier, and it saves you from stripping out your nuts and messing up your shocks and things like that. But just a suggestion for anybody that is curious to go to a 32-inch tire on the YXZ. I think I covered all that. So I guess the last thing I'm going to get into is the high-low gearbox. I've been asked, I've had people message me on Messenger, hey man, you ever thought about running the high-low gearbox on your YXZ? Looks like it could come in handy and all this good stuff. I think the people that are messaging me this, I think they're YXZ guys from the West Coast. I know 2 of them are, because they actually told me where they were at. But yeah, 2 of them are from the West Coast. And I've actually done a little bit of research on the high-low gearbox. For those of you that don't know, a gentleman out on the West Coast, if I mentioned this earlier in the video, I apologize, because I've been rambling and I kind of forget what I've said. But a gentleman on the West Coast came up with a high-low gearbox for the high-low gearbox for the YXZ that gives the YXZ a legitimate low gear. And I've seen several different videos on YouTube. One guy turned he has a yellow YXZ. He turned it into a 4-seater, and it's got the high-low gearbox. And then another guy has just the regular YXZ running the high-low gearbox. And there's video of them climbing up some pretty steep stuff. And it looks like it's at Moab. I can't say for sure, but it kind of looks like the Moab area. I mean, the rocks it's really steep. And the YXZs are just crawling up it at a snail's pace. I mean, it's kind of weird to watch. I mean, I've watching a YXZ do that. And I've seen it, and I've thought about it, and pretty much what I'm coming up with on that is I've never been to the West Coast. I'm hoping we get to go there. Don't know when it's going to be. I mean, we're still kind of a smaller channel. I hope we get to make it to Moab before we die. I mean, it's a hope. But everything that I've heard and everything that I've seen about Moab is the rock is kind of like driving on sandpaper. It's got extra super grippy traction. It's dry. It's just a lot easier to get really good traction at places like Moab and places on the West Coast. As to opposed to the East Coast, the rocks that we're coming up on, they're jagged, sharp, they're muddy, they're a lot of times wet and slick. And a lot of times you need a little bit of momentum to get over the obstacles we hit anyway. And I'm not saying that I'm totally against the high-low gearbox. I mean, I would love to have a low gear option in my YXZ. I think that would be incredible. I think it would be cool. But again, just describing a lot of the obstacles that we have to go over. And plus too, a lot of the guys that I ride with, they're running anywhere from 16 to 18 inches of ground clearance. Now, putting 32-inch tires on my YXZ, that has given me right at 14 and a half inches of ground clearance. So that's all I got, is 14 and a half inches. So a lot of times, not only am I having to contest going up something steep, wet, and a situation like that, but I'm also a lot of times bottoming out on something, whether it be a rock, a rut, or something like that, that's also kind of hindering me a little bit, which gives me more reason to need momentum to get over the obstacle I'm getting. So for those reasons alone right there, now there's been a time or two And we've got 1 or 2 videos up on the channel. I mean, I will admit, I'm not the most proud of. They were kind of embarrassing. But you take the good with the bad. It's just part of doing a YouTube channel. But there's one video, I'm not even going to bring it up because I don't want to give anybody the urge to go try to track it down. But there is one video that we did. I really think the hollow gearbox would have came in handy on that one. But so far, that one video, that's really been the only time I really think it would have stood out. Because, I mean, I'm kind of taking the opposite approach. Well, for one, the last thing I need to mention too, and I know I'm jumping from place to place, but I guess the most key factor in me running the hollow gearbox in my YXZ, it's got a price tag of $5,000. So when I think about forking out $5,000 and I look at the reward I'm going to get out of what I'm going to get out of it, the reward doesn't quite match the price. Yeah, so I don't really think the hollow gearbox is going to be, I don't think it's quite suited for the conditions that I'm riding in. And again, it'd be awesome to have. I'm sure there would be times when it would come in handy. But I mean, I got to say too, running a 70-30 gear reduction on the YXZ, I do think the gearing, it's not as low as your Can-Ams. It's definitely not as low as the Kawasaki, the KRX. It's not as low as Polaris. I mean, it's not as low as any of them, but I do feel pretty confident that it's a lot lower than most people realize. I mean, when Aaron first started riding with us, and again, he's the beast of the KRX guy. When he first started riding with us, he even commented several times. He said, you know, I got to admit, the YXZ, it gets a little lower than I thought it would. And it goes a lot better than I thought it would. You know, I was expecting something a little different. You know, you can't really, maybe he couldn't get the full gist of watching the videos. But I do think with a 70-30 gear reduction, it does get a little lower than some people may give it credit for. But then on the other hand, it's not as low as the other machines that I'm riding with. So as far as trying to turn my machine into a crawler, I'm trying to go the other direction as to where I'm trying to beef my machine up and make it more sturdy to where it's durable and strong enough to hit certain obstacles with a little more momentum. I'm running a Weller Racing steering rack, Weller Racing tie rods, Rhino 2.0 axles. Now I've got a heavy duty front diff. I'm running a 1/2 inch plastic skid plate that I picked up locally from Slick Rock Skids. They're in Rockwood, Tennessee. Awesome skid plate. It works phenomenal. I just glide over rock. Sometimes I can feel the pressure, but slide over them like it's an ice cube. The only downfall to Slick Rock Skids, if anybody would be interested in picking up a skid plate from them, they do not ship. So I guess whenever they're this local to Windrock, there's so many side-by-sides in this area, there's not really much reason to ship. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to make my machine a lot more durable to where it can take the harder hits and go in with things with a little more momentum than other machines. Ever since I've owned my YXZ, I have never considered it a crawler. I've never called it a crawler. I've never insinuated it was a crawler. I mean, I'm well aware of the machine that I got and what its capabilities are. Instead, I kind of embrace it for what it is. I mean, it's a momentum machine, and I try to do my best to use the momentum part of it to its advantage. And I mean, for the most part, a lot of times it works out pretty good. There's been a few times, yeah, not so much. And I'm sure after this video's done, I'm gonna think, man, I meant to mention this. I meant to mention that. There is something else that I forgot to mention. Going back to the ride that I had with me and Aaron this past Sunday and his mother. I had my sway. I mentioned that I reconnected my rear sway bar links just to give me better stability on gravel roads. Well, again, if any of you guys ever have the opportunity to ride with Aaron, and he says you're going to be doing easy trails, don't necessarily plan for that, because some people's idea of easy is going to be different than other people's idea of easy. Halfway through that trail, with my rear sway bars connected, before we got to halfway through it, we were going through ruts and we were going over rocks that were on one side of your machine and things like this, but numerous times, either my front right or my front left wheel was 2 foot off the ground. I mean, my machine felt stiff, and my wheels were coming off the ground left and right. It felt very uncomfortable. I know a lot of people think, well, running without sway bars, it seems like it would feel tipsy and all these other things. But running with sway bars, I can't say how it is for other machines, but I know running with my YXZ, running with my sway bars on slower technical type trails, especially whenever you're off balance and off camber and different situations and all that thing and things like that, running with your sway bars, that's whenever it feels tipsy. So about halfway through that ride, I was finally like, look, I can't take this anymore. I got to get these things off. So I ended up removing my rear sway bars, and as soon as I did and we took off, everything just felt so much better. So what I'm getting at on that, if anybody out there, are you primarily the East Coast guys, if any of you guys are riding the slower trails, and I've mentioned this in a prior video, I think last summer, but when I decided to remove my front and rear sway bars to kind of compensate for a little bit of that extra tippiness that you get, I went ahead and added 1-inch wheel spacers on all 4 wheels. I've seen a lot of posts about this on in Facebook about people running wheel spacers and if they had any luck and does your wheel fall off and things like that. So I just thought I would do a quick touch up on this. I'm running 1-inch wheel spacers on each wheel of my machine. I didn't want to go any bigger than 1 inch. Again, I was just trying to compensate a little bit for having my sway bars removed. And the wider the wheel spacer you go, the more stress you're putting on your machine. You're putting stress on your ball joints. I'm sure you're probably adding some stress to your tie rods when you're turning. You're putting stress on your axles. So I didn't want to go too awful far with the wheel spacers, so that's why I kept it at 1 inch. But what I did when I installed them, and again, I'm probably telling a lot of you people things you already know, but when you go to, if you're going to run wheel spacers, when you go to install them, put some blue Loctite on your wheel studs, the studs that you're bolting your wheel spacer to. Put some blue Loctite on it, crank down your lugs at the specs you want them at, and maybe let it sit for 20 or 30 minutes just to let it kind of dry some, and then put your wheels back on. But if you use blue Loctite and get your lug tightened down at the specs you want it, let it dry, you won't have to go back and retorque your lugs. You won't have to worry about your wheel spacer coming off and your wheel going flying off. The reason I'm mentioning this, I posted a video earlier today in our Facebook group of YXZs on a racetrack, and I posted it up. It was a little humorous. But one of the YXZs is hitting a curve, and sure enough, his rear passenger wheel just comes flying off of his machine. And it made me think of the wheel spacer thing. So I put the wheel spacers on middle of last summer. I Loctited with blue Loctite. I put blue Loctite on all 4 wheels, or excuse me, the studs that your wheels, I'm not saying Loctite the lugs that fasten your wheels to the spacer. So I hope you guys understand that. Loctite the lug nuts that go on the studs that hold on your wheel spacer. But I did that about a year ago, used blue Loctite on them, and I think twice since then I've removed my wheel just to give them a double check to make sure everything was still good. I didn't put a wrench on it. I don't want to put a wrench on it and break the Loctite. But what I did was I took my wheel off, I felt the spacer, it still felt like it was tight. I kind of felt the lugs with my fingers, everything still feels tight. But yeah, I did not put a wrench on it because I didn't want to break up any of the blue Loctite. Put the wheel back on. I've not had a wheel come off yet. I've not had anything feel loose yet. Everything's still running just as good as can be. If it's still going pretty good in a year from now, I may go ahead and break them free and put a new sealant of blue Loctite on it and just to let it seal up all over again. But blue Loctite wheel spacers. Guys, I don't know. I hope I haven't bored you all to death. The gearing thing, it's kind of been an issue with some people. I'm sure some people kind of get the gist. But, and I do apologize for not keeping you guys a little bit better updated on my front diff. We're out riding. We don't really what's the word I'm looking for? We don't really explain every time we scratch our back, you know. I mean, we kind of let you guys figure stuff out for your own. If we break an axle, if a wheel comes off the hub, or, you know, I've stripped out my steering rack or something like that, we try to mention it in the video and show that. But and that's probably a downfall of the video. Maybe it is. Maybe some people kind of appreciate it. But we don't really do a lot of jibber jabber. We do a little bit in the beginning, and that's just because I like to have the guys tell what tires they're running and things like this that they got going on with their machine. Because a lot of times if you don't, there's going to be 30 questions come up. What tires has so-and-so got? What tires has he got? So that's the main reason we do the little gist that we do before the videos. But yeah, I will try to keep you guys better updated on the front diff. I hope I cleared things up on the gearing, on the newer gearing on the YXZs versus the older gearing. I hope that made sense. And yeah, I hope I got everything through to you. I don't even know what now I'm starting to ramble. I've been talking for too long. Yeah, great talking to you guys. But seriously, thanks for tuning into the video. If you made it this long, highly appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please consider subscribing. Try to share the video. Anything you can do to help the channel grow, we greatly appreciate it. With all that out of the way, guys, stay tuned. I guess the next time I see you, we'll be out on the trail.